Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Living in Switzerland. The series is brought to you by Rigby. We are a staffing and project services company based in Zurich. If you or anyone you know of is looking for a new role in Switzerland, or if you're looking to hire, let us know. We'd be happy to help. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. Then, if we have anything that might be of interest, we'll gladly let you know.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expert Guide to Your Life in Switzerland. Today we have something a little bit different for you, which is a talk with the author Andie Pilot. Andie is a trained pastry chef with a Swiss mother who grew up in Canada and moved to Switzerland in 2010. She started a blog about Swiss food, Helvetic Kitchen, in 2015, and from there has published 3 books, Helvetic Kitchen, Drink Like the Swiss, and Swiss Cookies. Today she lives in the bucolic Emmental Valley. Andie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Andie, could you tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you here to Switzerland?
Absolutely. Yeah, as you mentioned, I grew up in Canada. My mom was Swiss, so we spent a lot of my childhood summers in Switzerland visiting my grandparents. And that's when I sort of first got a taste of Swiss food, which has been a topic that has fascinated me ever since. When I was a girl, we would always be down at the lake eating cervelat, which is probably the most famous sausage in Switzerland. And we would be having these paprika potato chips, which I have such strong memories of this time. Later on, I trained to be a pastry chef, and I really wanted to work a little bit in Europe. I had this obvious connection to Switzerland. I had family here as well. So for me, that was the obvious choice to move here in 2010.
Right. You mentioned the paprika chips there, or crisps, as we would say.
Yeah.
I sometimes think that there's a kind of an unwritten rule here in Switzerland that if you have any kind of social gathering at all, you have to have the Zweifel paprika chips.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you noticed that? They're everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere. Even, every apéro you're ever invited to, it's not plain chips, it's always paprika. When you go to the lake or to the body, you always see bags of these chips everywhere. Absolutely.
And are there 2 or 3 things in particular that you've noticed about the Swiss approach to food and eating that's different from what you were used to in Canada?
Yes, for me, there's 2 big differences. The biggest, I guess, is just that the main meal of the day is eaten at lunchtime instead of in the evening. In Canada, we would have our big meal at dinner time. And here, the main warm cooked meal is always offered at lunchtime. In places like out here where I live in the Emmental Valley, people are still truly going home to eat that meal. Someone is preparing a warm meal. The kids leave the school, walk home, eat a warm meal, and then walk back to school. And that's the main difference, I think. The other thing that I notice is really the seasonality of the food. In Canada, you can get all the produce all year round. And in Switzerland, it's much more of a special time when asparagus, say, is in season and you have Spargelzeit, and in every restaurant you have asparagus on the menu. It's the same with strawberries. In the fall, you have Wildzeit, which is when you have the game meat, and you have these beautiful autumnal plates with chestnuts and many of the seasonal foods. And just sort of keeping these foods to one time of year and not having them all year long. That's another thing I notice in Switzerland. The seasonality of the food.
And is there anything that you would tell visitors or people who are newly arrived in Switzerland that they should definitely try?
Yes, there are so many things, but I can give you my top 3. Of course, cheese. Cheese is, I think, the best part of Swiss cuisine. They manage to use it in so many different dishes. Of course, you have to have the classic dishes like cheese fondue, like raclette. And there are other dishes that incorporate cheese as well. Alpler Macaronen, which is a pasta dish that uses a lot of cheese. Or Kässchnitte, which is basically just an open face melted cheese sandwich. And I love all kinds of Swiss cheese. I love the really normal kinds that you're used to that are exported into countries all over the world, like Gruyere, or Vacherin cheeses like this. But also there are lots of strange Swiss cheeses that are interesting. There's the green Schabziger cheese from Canton Glarus. It's a really hard, crumbly cheese. You can crumble a bit of that over a plate of spaghetti or even over your fondue. It has a really tangy, interesting flavor. There's just a lot of different cheese to discover in Switzerland, and it's really regional.
It is.
Let me think. My second favorite, you can also get a cheese variety of it, is the Valle. This is sort of a quiche, these like open topped tarts. And I just love everything about them. They are sweet, they are savory. You can get them in every flavor. There's cheese and onion. In the summertime, they make them with cherries, with apricots, plums. And yeah, this is also something that's very regional. Different regions have different versions of these beautiful tarts. In the city of Chur, for example, they have a meat-filled one. In the city of Bern, during their famous onion market, you get the onion tarts as well, and you can find them all over the country. And I think there's something really special in Switzerland. My grandmother made them every Friday. She would make Vaya. That would be her Vaya day. It could be sweet, it could be savory, but that was the day to use up whatever she had left in her kitchen. And she made these tarts. They're really delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I have one more recommendation for one of my favorite things to eat in Switzerland, which is kind of like a chocolate bar, sort of. It's called Kegi Fret. It's a bit like a high-class Kit Kat. It's just like thin wafers, and they are enrobed in chocolate. It's very delicious. You can buy it in any store here. And if you're going on a hike or you're going skiing, this is a great thing to tuck in a pocket and enjoy in the afternoon. What do you like to eat, Daniel? What do you recommend when people come here?
There are so many great things, as you say, Andy, but if I was forced to choose one, it would have to be fondue, the obvious one, probably. I love how there's this never-ending debate here in Switzerland, and you have to choose a side between fondue and raclette. For me, it would be fondue. There's a place near us. It's a restaurant in the forest called Degenried, which is very good. We go there sometimes. So that would be it for me.
Amazing. So you're firmly team fondue.
I am. Definitely.
I am too, actually. I love it as well.
And can you tell us about any unusual Swiss foods?
Of course, yeah. There are many. I can tell you about maybe what is Switzerland's strangest named dish. That's the dish called cholera. This is local to the Valais region. And there's a sort of a persistent rumor that the dish was named for the disease cholera after a particularly bad outbreak in the 1830s. People in the valleys in Valais stayed home to avoid contamination, and then they were forced to use things that they had in their larder and their gardens to feed their families. And basically, it's a tart that is sort of a pastry casing, and then it has potatoes in it. It has apples, pears, cheese, bacon, and it was sort of born from this necessity. But more likely, however, it's named after the glowing coal in the fireplace where the pan would have been sitting to bake. The word coal in High German is Holle, but in the Walliser dialect, one of Switzerland's most famous dialects, this word is Holla or Holu. And another possibility was maybe the part of the Backhaus, the place where they stored the coals. This was known as the cholera, and that's where they used to rest the dish before they baked it. So maybe the name comes from that. But it's an excellent dish. It's really delicious. It's easy to make yourself, and they serve it quite often in the Valais when you're skiing. It would be an excellent warm dish to have.
Right. Sounds great.
I can tell you about another great foodie destination within Switzerland.
Yes, please do.
That's the Val de Travers in Canton Neuchâtel. Of course, this region is maybe most famous because it is the home of the famous spirit absinthe. Yeah, this was originated there centuries ago, and then later banned for most of the 20th century. And later, I think in 2004, it was legal again to make it in the Val de Travers. And there is a wonderful museum there that you can visit that sort of documents the history of it. It documents the banning of the drink, and it talks a lot about all the people who lived in this region who continued to make it while it was banned, and sort of what they had to go through to be able to continue producing this drink and not get caught and fined by the police and have their stills, confiscated. And so you can visit this museum, and you can also do a hike, the Absinthe Trail in this region, which is excellent. And while you're there, you can have another sort of unusual Swiss food, which is a whole ham cooked in asphalt. This is the jambon cuit dans l'asphalte, ham cooked in asphalt. Asphalt itself was discovered in the little town of La Presta in 1711. And by 1873, it was mined at an industrial scale. It was sent all over Europe. Parts of London are built using this asphalt from the little town of La Presta. And that continued for over a century. In the 1930s, that's when they started making this dish where they would cook the ham in the asphalt. They would wrap it up in aluminum foil, I guess aluminum foil now. And then they would sort of submerge it into the molten asphalt for about 4 hours. It was around 160 degrees Celsius, so it would just sort of low and slow simmer there. And then they would take it out and slice it up and serve it. Initially, it was to celebrate Saint Barbara, who is the patron saint of miners and artillery. And today you can go and visit these mines there. You can eat the ham. They still prepare it in the traditional method. And when you do, if you do go there, you will be served beer from a kind of local Swiss brewery from the mountains, from the Jura, just in a canton over. And that beer comes from a brewery called BFM, or Brasserie de Franche-Montagne. Yep. And this company once made the best beer in the world.
Wow, look at that. And St. Barbara was the patron saint of miners and artillery.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
I didn't know that. My mum's called Barbara. I'll have to let her know that.
Yeah, we recently took a trip through a part of the Gotthard Tunnel, and we took it on one of the historic trains on the Crocodile. And they stopped the train in the middle of the tunnel and shone a light. And you could see there was a figure of Barbara was carved into the side of the mountain because they had carved her when they went through the mountain, because she was their patron saint. Yeah. I'd love to talk a little more about beer.
Sure, let's go for it.
Okay. So as I was saying, the BFM is one of Switzerland's most famous breweries. And they were started in the late 90s. But to understand the history of beer in Switzerland, we need to learn a little bit about the Swiss beer cartel. Did you know that there was a cartel controlling Swiss beer for much of the 20th century?
No, please tell me more.
Yes, in 1890, there were 500 domestic breweries in Switzerland. But by 1998, there were only 24. So what happened? An association of brewers, the Schweizerischer Bierbrauerverein, was founded in 1887. After the financial collapse following the First World War, the association lobbied successfully to impose high taxes on imported beers. By 1935, they had enough control of the market to write their own convention. And the organization sort of worked as a cartel where they controlled everything from beer distribution, the size of the bottles, what ingredients were used. And that means that restaurants, hotels, shops, supermarkets, they were all forced into exclusive contracts with this organization. So initially, this was a protection of Swiss beer, but it eventually sort of became its undoing. There was no reason to change, no competition, innovation suffered, and so did the beer. And then finally in the 90s, the cartel collapsed and foreign beers flooded the market, which was happy for the consumers because then there was a much better selection of beer. And ironically, almost all of these cartel breweries were bought by foreign companies like Heineken and Carlsberg. So if you look to see who Feldschlossen or Calanda is owned by, it's these big brewery conglomerates that they had been trying to avoid. So at the weakest, the breweries were only 24, but the rebuilding of the Swiss beer market, at the same time, there's been this huge worldwide surge in craft beer. This means that there's a huge number of microbreweries in Switzerland at the time. So according to the Swiss Register of Brewers, there are around 1,000 active breweries registered in Switzerland today. And that makes it the highest number of breweries per capita in the whole world.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah. So although there are these big breweries of the past, they still kind of dominate the Swiss beer scene, but it's definitely worth your while to check out the little microbreweries that are brewing beer in your region. It's a small, but it's a thriving scene. And really the grandfather of these little breweries is this BFM, the Brasserie de Franche-Montagne. Its founder is called Jérôme Rebete. He did a degree in viticulture, which was more typically for wine, but he had the goal of making a brewery in his home region, which is the Jura. He succeeded. His brewery opened in 1997, and he brews using traditional cask methods. And then he often uses unconventional ingredients like lapsang souchong tea, sarawak peppers. And his beers have received international acclaim. They're really excellent. They're some of my favorite beers. In 2009, their Abbé de Saint-Bonchien was declared the best beer in the world by the New York Times. And they continue to make excellent beer. And if you are interested in sour beers, they have a big sour beer festival every July where they invite some of the most famous sour beer producers in the world, like Cantillon, Lover Beer, and they all meet in this tiny little town in the Jura, and everybody drinks a lot of beer, and it's a wonderful time.
That sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm. So there's really only one thing I love more than beer, and that might be cookies. So I'd love to talk a bit about cookies and tell you some great cookie destinations to visit in Switzerland.
Please.
Is that okay? Do you have a favorite Swiss cookie?
Well, where you live, if I'm not mistaken, is the Cambly factory, right? So that must be difficult living down the road from the Cambly factory. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it is difficult. I have to say it's become easier since the pandemic. The Cambly factory they called it the Cambly experience. You could famously go to the Cambly factory and taste every single cookie that they made. Mm-hmm. They had big bowls. You could just reach in and taste everything. But since the pandemic, of course, this part has been shut down. But if you go to the cafe, they still give you a big bowl that's like full of all sorts of different cookies. So you still get a taste of a lot of different things. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. When I open up my window in the morning, I can smell the cookies baking. So yeah, that can be a little bit tough. But yeah, it's definitely still, our town is really beautiful. It's worth a visit. It's a great day trip for most parts of Switzerland. And I can tell you a little bit about the history of the factory.
Yes, please.
Yeah, they have been making cookies in our town since 1911. They've been using the same recipe. And basically the story starts with the elder Oscar Cambly. That's, I think, 3 generations ago. He was kind of a wandering baker. He was traveling throughout Switzerland. He went to the western part of the country and fell in love with a girl. He followed her back to her hometown, the town of Trubschachen, and he opened this factory and used her family's bretzeli recipe to make their most famous cookie. That's the bretzeli. That's a pressed cookie. It's still their most bought cookie in Switzerland today, and they export it all over the world. It's delicious. Yeah,
it is.
And one other really interesting thing about the Cambly factory and the company itself is their dedication to quality ingredients and to local ingredients. In 1911, the elder Cambly shook hands with the owner of the mill. The mill in our town is the Haldeman mill. So he shook hands with Elder Haldeman and promised him that as long as the mill was producing flour in our town, Cambly would buy that flour and no other. And this handshake agreement exists today. And it's the same for our dairy. They buy all their milk and cream from the local dairy. And I think it really makes a difference in the quality of their product. So I love this love story to go along with a cookie. It's not the only Swiss cookie love story. There's another great cookie destination you can visit. That's the town of Willisau in Canton Lucerne. And they make a really hard ring cookie. It's ridiculously hard. Anecdotally, it's the favorite cookie of dentists because people need dental work after eating this really hard cookie. It's citrus flavored. And this also starts with a wandering baker, a man named Heinrich Maurer. He broke his father's heart when he said he wasn't going to take over the farm, and instead he became a baker. But despite all his wandering, he kept coming back to this little town of Willisau, of course, because he was in love with a girl there. Eventually, he came back for good. He settled there soon after the girl's father died, and he managed to buy a big piece of property right on the main street. And there he opened a bakery and cafe. Sadly, a few years later, the girl died, but he wasn't sad for long because the girl had a cousin, and the cousin was working at a local castle, the Schloss Hallwil. And she came to town. She liked the look of the baker and she married him. And she had been working at the castle as a cook. And so she brought all of this experience as a cook already. And she also brought a big binder full of recipes. And in this binder of recipes, Heinrich Maurer, the baker, found one that looked really good. And it was a ring cookie. And he started developing it and kind of made it ready for commercial sales. And he named it after the town that he had adopted. This became the Willisauer Ringli. And later on, the bakery was sold. So this was all happening in the sort of mid 1800s, late 1800s. In the 1930s, the bakery was sold to a different family, the Amrine family. And they bought not only the bakery, but the secret recipe for the Ringli. And that's the recipe that they use still today. And you can visit Café Am Rhein, which is just in the main street of Willisau. You can buy the Ringli, and there's even a special technique for eating the cookies. So it's a ring, you put it in the palm of your hand, and then you use the elbow of your opposite hand, you put it right in the middle, and you press down until it breaks into a few pieces.
Oh, so it really is hard.
Yeah, it's super duper hard. And then these you want to enjoy more like a lozenge than a traditional cookie. So you put it in your mouth and you suck on it. And if you can believe it, it's not even the only historic Swiss cookie that is recommended to be enjoyed in this manner.
Oh.
The most famous cookie from Zurich is, of course, the Tierkel. This is a honey flavored biscuit. It's also incredibly hard. And this one is also a pressed cookie. They used to press many different designs into the dough, and it was often used by guilds. The guilds would press in their guild symbol and give it out to all the guild members. They would use these cookies for eating, but also as decoration. So they would often punch a hole in it, and you could hang it on your Christmas tree at Christmas time and things like this. And this one is quite interesting too. It doesn't have a love story as its origin story. It's something quite a bit more gruesome. The history involves a witch trial. And in the late 1400s, there was a witch trial for a woman named Margaret Bucher. And she was accused of giving a piece of Tierkel to a little boy who subsequently died. And at the time, this wasn't quite as nefarious as maybe it seems. At the time, things like Tiergel or Lebkuchen, these had medicinal properties. People often ate them when they were feeling ill. So she very innocently could have given the boy a little bit of this biscuit, and then he died from whatever illness he had. Oh. However, it wasn't the only thing she was accused of. She was accused of turning milk into blue flames, of killing an entire herd of cattle with her magic, and also of copulation with the devil. Yes. The prosecutors of the case, they told her that she wouldn't be executed immediately if she confessed to all of these things. So she did the only thing she could, and she confessed all of these made up.
It's quite a bind.
Yeah. To all of these accusations. And instead of execution, they sentenced her to be eingemauert, which is walled up alive. So yeah, she died soon after, unfortunately.
That is a bit more gruesome than the other two stories.
Absolutely. But you can still find the transcripts from this court and many other witch trials. Actually, Switzerland has quite a lot of witch trials. I found this in the Zurich Cantonal Archive, and they even took a photograph of it for me, of the original document. And I could put that in my book, which was very exciting, but also sad.
Speaking of your books, Andie, could you tell us a little bit about where we can find those?
Absolutely, yeah. So my new book, Swiss Cookies, is available in English and also in German. You can find it through Berkeley Books. That's the publisher. You can find them online. It's available in Oral Füssli and many other bookshops throughout Switzerland. And you can find my recipes on my blog. That's helvetickitchen.com.
Great. Well, thank you, Andie. It's been a real pleasure. You've given me plenty of food for thought. I'm off now to have some cookies.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
All right, so thank you for listening, and once again to Andie. That was great fun. Please do check out Andie's blog at helvetickitchen.com.
And thanks to you for listening. We'll include links in the show notes to our guest and to further materials about some of the topics that we've spoken about today. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing and project services company here in Zurich. If you would like our help either to hire or to be hired, let us know. Best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. You can also sign up for our newsletter at rigby.ch/newsletter to receive our Living in Switzerland guide. We'll send you 1 email per month about expat-focused news and jobs in Switzerland. So thanks, and until the next time.